Okay, and I think we're live. Hi
Perfect.
everyone, welcome to the Technology for Good Hangout. This is episode 17. The guest on the show today is Chris Kernahan, a fellow Irishman. So today we have an all-Irish show. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much indeed.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Who are you, Chris? What do you do?
My name is Chris Kernan. I am a SAP mentor and I am a senior technical, now I'm actually a cloud architect with SAP. I've recently changed jobs, in my second week and really, really enjoying it. I specialize in cloud architecture for the HANA Enterprise Cloud at SAP.
Okay, and you have your Twitter handle on screen there.
Yep, I am at Boo Boo.
Okay, we won't ask where that came from.
That's a whole other conversation, but it is. It's now in its 18th year. Over half my life, I've been known by that name.
Okay, over beer sometime, over beer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, we'll head on into the stories, Chris. And the first one I came across this week was this one. As always, we start off with some climate-related story to kind of set a context for the show. And this week I saw this one, how weather-related blackouts in the US have doubled since 2003, according to this report. And you can see a graph of the different things that have caused the blackouts in the US. You know, storms, cold weather, ice storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, extreme heat, and wildfires in there as well.
Mm.
And they say they've doubled since 2003, but in fact, it's actually gone up tenfold in the years before that. It depends on how the classification of an outage is. Is it 50,000 customer homes or businesses or more, whereas before it was a smaller number. So. This is having a serious impact. We don't see as much of that here in Europe, Chris, because in Europe we have most of our lines underground, whereas in the US most of the lines are overground, so they're far more fragile when it comes to weather-related issues. But it is a sign that as well we are seeing the climate having an impact in North America on business as well as residential.
Absolutely. It's interesting actually because they do state that part of the increase is also led by the fact that the data itself is actually better. So it is, but there can't be any doubt that that is you're seeing change in weather patterns, and let's face it, the US does have an aging infrastructure.
Yeah.
That has to be playing a factor as well.
But
So
we all have an aging infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure in Europe is just as old as it is in the US. So I understand that's playing a part, but there isn't the same amount of outages happening in Europe as there is in the US. Now, part of that is that they have more weather-related issues, climate change-related weather issues in the US than we're having in Europe. They have more storms, more wildfires than we're having in Europe. We have a bit more flooding. But part of it is the overground nature of the US network as well. So it's yeah, the US has proven to be one of the obstacles to climate change acceptance, I think,
yeah,
globally. I think it's reasonably fair to say. So hopefully this kind of information being getting out there will tip the U.S. politicians who are the main obstruction. I mean, most of the U.S. public is on board, I think, with climate change at this point. It's mostly the politicians who are obstructing it, the ones on the right in particular. Hopefully, when businesses in the US start to see this kind of information and it's presented to them, that it's affecting their business, maybe they'll get on board with their politicians and start twisting their thumbs or whatever.
no, absolutely, absolutely.
So on to the rest of the stories. And the next one I saw, speaking of weather-related and power issues, the new Prime Minister of India, the world's largest democracy with 1.2 billion people, had their elections last week. And their new Prime Minister is called Narendra Modi. And he kicked out the party who'd been in power for a long time, whose name escapes me now, but the Congress Party, I think it is.
Yes.
And So he's after winning the election, and he has history in his own home state of being a solar advocate, an advocate for solar power. And his home state is the largest generator of solar power in India at the moment as a result of his premiership there. But now that he's the Prime Minister of the country of India, he has pledged to bring solar power to every Indian home by 2019, so basically 5 years' time. And that's an incredible commitment because, well, there's two things. First, I guess, is there are 400 million people in India who right now do not have electricity in their homes, and he's pledging to bring electricity to all of those 400 million people. And then the other 800 million people, he's promising to give them solar power electricity as well, so that the pollution and the climate-related issues that are associated with generating electricity for 1.2 billion people will be vastly reduced as a result of this. I think this is an incredible initiative.
Well, this for me is really exciting because it provides India with two massive opportunities. One is it's as we talked about earlier on, I'm more fascinated by the solar cooker because there was a report on respiratory infections and illnesses within rural communities due to the fuel that they use and the lack of ventilation in the houses. So the solar cooker to me is really exciting. But if you take the way the population spread is within India, if you then succeed in India, you could then go to Africa and apply the same principles and technologies in Africa, and it could be Indian companies doing that and beating out Western companies and everything, and it is just fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen some of that in Europe as well, and not nearly anywhere to the same extent, but Germany kickstarted these solar initiatives in Germany about 8 or 10 years ago at this point now, by having feed-in tariffs of 47 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity generated at home.
Yes.
Which was extremely generous, way above the market rates. And of course, it kickstarted a massive solar industry, which, as you say, it meant then that German companies were leading the world in home solar equipment. So yeah, as you said, this has huge implications for the solar industry in India and globally as a result.
Exactly. It's deal with China. Like in Europe, we don't have to deal with the same type of rural poverty that we that they have in and I don't mean poverty in terms of lack of infrastructure and things like that. Once you actually have dealt with those and find ways of dealing with them and working with them and around them, then you can go and do that in other places and take those lessons and actually have real world experience. It's hugely exciting.
It is. And the other story then that I wanted to talk about, well, there's lots more stories we're going to be talking about, but the next one that I came across that I thought was really interesting was this one out of Dell. And there's a couple of stories in this. Basically, the first story is, and it's the most interesting of the three, is that Dell has introduced new packaging. And, while that sounds kind of humdrum, the thing about it is the packaging they're introducing is what's called carbon negative. So it's air carbon packaging. This is packaging which consumes carbon from the air during its manufacture. So it's actually carbon negative. Rather than producing carbon while making it through energy consumption, this consumes carbon, and it consumes more carbon in its manufacture than it takes to make it. So it's a carbon negative packaging, and it's recyclable. And the company who are producing it are called New Light Technologies. And earlier today, I tweeted a link to a video that they have out there about their process of manufacturing this plastic. And they've got a series of different types of plastic, different grades of plastic. And so it's not just for packaging. You can also use it to make chairs. You can use it to make anything that you can kind of make plastics with. And it's also cheaper than fossil fuel-based plastics, which is incredible. So not alone is it carbon negative, it's also cheaper. So it's a double win for Dell on that front. They're getting cheaper packaging and they're getting carbon negative packaging. So that's really awesome. They're also going to closed loop recycling for their products, and this will be brought in over time. They're starting with the Optiplex 3030, which is the desktop machine. So it means they'll take in plastic, recycle the plastic, and use that recycled plastic to make goods. And then at the end of their life, they'll take that plastic back, recycle it, and make more goods with it. So it's closed loop recycling.
So the question I have is this a symptom of the fact that Michael Dell has control of the company again and is able to, push these types of initiatives through?
I suspect that's part of it. I do. I haven't seen. I mean, the only other company I've seen come anywhere close to this in terms of the recycling, I guess, is HP, and them on their inkjet cartridges, and they have initiatives as well. Dell have had initiatives on recycling for quite a while as well. In I think it's 78 countries they do recycling on their desktops and laptops. They'll take them back and recycle them properly. This whole closed loop thing is a nice initiative. As I say, HP had a closed loop on their inkjet cartridges for a while, but of course the other side of that is I have a bit of an objection to inkjet cartridges as a concept anyway, particularly when there's technology out there for things like solid brick ink. Xerox have solid ink blocks instead of cartridges, so there's no plastic involved. You just drop these blocks of ink into your printer and it prints them out and they're completely consumed.
The thing I would love to see of this is, I was reading a thing about IBM during the week where they invented an entirely new self-healable type of plastic. If you can combine that with that air, the air carbon, that would just be phenomenal. You would have a carbon negative, self-healing, fully recyclable, easily recyclable plastic.
Yeah.
That
would it'd be awesome. So let's keep going. The next couple of stories revolve around Google, as we saw. Google are in the connectivity space at this point, and before the show started, Chris and I were having a chat about Google and how they're into almost everything, it's scary almost the amount of areas they're in. Everything from self-driving cars through search engines and ads, but also things like drones, and now they're planning this big global Wi-Fi network in the cloud. They've teamed up with Ruckus, and they're going to build. Ruckus are a large manufacturer of mesh networking for Wi-Fi, basically. So they've teamed up with this Ruckus Wireless crowd, and they're going to build a Wi-Fi network in the cloud, which sounds a bit off the wall, but of course that's the kind of thing that Google does typically. It does this kind of real pie in the sky things. Another thing they're into is kite-based wind energy generation. I don't know if you saw that. Makani is the company they bought, and basically they've got these large kites which generate electricity from the wind up at a couple of thousand feet. So
I remember seeing something like that in Popular Mechanics. It must be about 10 years ago, where they were talking about putting big fans up in the jet stream.
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Totally practical, but cool as.
There's actually quite a bit of work being done in that space as well, and it's becoming more practical by the day, which is interesting. But in this particular story, the Google one, it sounds. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I'm not, because I know a bit about networking, but not enough to know how this works. Because they're talking about having the Wi-Fi controllers being cloud-based, and unless I'm missing a trick, you kind of have to connect to the internet to connect to a cloud-controlled Wi-Fi network.
Yeah.
So,
even if you look further down the piece, there is actually a physical device attached to a pole.
Yeah.
But you're right, it doesn't. I think it actually doesn't come across particularly well in the article itself.
I think that's it, Chris, because Google are a lot cleverer than you and I, obviously, and they've obviously thought this through, and they wouldn't be doing it if there was something as basic as, but that's not going to work because they haven't.
No, definitely not. But it does bring us into the world of software-defined networks, which is an area that is becoming more and more to the fore within cloud-based technologies and infrastructure as a service-based technology. You know, we've seen API-driven infrastructure configurations and those sorts of things defining compute resources and software configurations. What we're now getting to is software-defined networks as sort of the next layer down that's being seriously tackled by many companies. But that is interesting.
It is, yeah. And you've also got this story then. Google are rolling out fiber networks in different cities. I think they're looking at about 30 cities across the US now. There's only one or two at the moment, but now they're looking at beefing it up over the next 12 months to about 30 cities. And I think they've got those 30 cities picked out at this point. And what they've said, and this is an obvious kind of slap in the face to the companies in the US, the big Comcasts and people like that. They're basically saying, yeah, we're fully neutral in our network. You come onto our fiber, and you know we're not slowing anyone down. We're not changing anyone's quality of service. Everyone's got the same. We don't charge for peering as well, so it's.
You ever get the feeling? Do you remember the April Fool that Google did? It must be about 12 years ago now. About where they were putting fiber through the sewer system, and your connection would be out the back of your toilet. And it was a great April Fool, and I look at that now and I just think, did they do that? And then somebody in the telecoms companies absolutely threw a hissy fit, and Google realized, we may actually be onto something. It's difficult now to actually to do it, but I think it's fabulous. I really did. It's one of those ones where BT, AT&T, and Cable and Wireless pretty much run all the telecoms backbone within the UK. But there doesn't seem to be, there's no tiering within the UK, and within Europe, I don't think there will ever be any tiering because of the way they handle telecommunications, because they're actually getting rid of roaming charges and stuff. Yeah. So you look over across the pond at the United States, and you just get a very clear impression that they're just nuts, because there's no way this can be good for business. It's good for the telecoms companies, but it's no good for anybody else. It can't be. And for Google to stand
but I mean, they've had a duopoly in telecoms there for the last decade, basically. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, there's no innovation which is customer-centric.
No, there isn't. There definitely isn't. But at some point, it is going to kill them. It is going to kick them in the bum, and Google's going to come, and Google's going to be the people to do it. It's just, I think, a little bit unfortunate that it's Google, and the fact that Google does everything, and I think we're getting to a point where that's becoming a little bit scary. But somebody has to take them on.
Yeah, and Google are one of the few people who have the scale, and not just that, but they have the motive as well to do it, because it's holding them up. So they'll just say, okay, well, telecoms are holding us up, well, we'll just root around them and keep going.
Well, I think I can't remember exactly where it was, but there was sort of a diagram of the Google interconnects between their data centers. Somebody had theorized what the interconnects looked like and what the bandwidth was. It was scary. Going back about 3 or 4 years ago, I think they were pulling something like either gigabit or 10 gig connections between data centers. It was just the amount of bandwidth that was going between them was phenomenal. So, what they're doing now is just extending that network to metropolitan areas, not between data centers.
Yes.
So,
more, please, more.
Absolutely.
And sticking with Google, we've got one more Google story.
Yep.
And that is that they've added their OK Google voice search for all Chrome users. I haven't seen it on my version of Chrome here on the Mac yet, but I assume I just need to update if they have rolled it out for the Mac version. But basically, it's the idea that whether you're on Chrome on the Mac, presumably Chrome on the handset as well, because it says all versions of Chrome, and PC as well. That you'll have the kind of microphone there, and you'll be able to talk to Google. Say, "Okay, Google." You have to enable it. You have to actually give it permission, so that it can do it to start it off. And I guess that makes sense because when you enable it, what it means is Google is now listening to you all the time. Your microphone is constantly turned on. Google is listening all the time, so that it hears you when you say "Okay, Google," and you then, I guess, need to be a trusting individual to trust that that the traffic between Google and you is not being intercepted. For one thing, that would never happen. No one would ever do that. No.
You don't have the NSA listening to us at all.
And you'd have to be very trusting as well that Google would never do any evil. But of course they've said they will never do any evil, so that's fair enough.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Eric Schmidt is no longer the CEO, and I think out of a lot of them, I think he may have been the most Machiavellian. So, but that it is a, what's the word I'm looking for? A perspective. So it is not the right word, but anyway. I love the Google Now. I had a Nexus. I really enjoyed it. I had a Nexus 4. When the Nexus 5 came out, I seriously considered it because it was baked into the Android OS. Just, do I want my phone listening to me all the time? It's bad enough, forcing other people to listen to me, but to have my phone listen to me on a regular basis, it could cause all sorts of problems. But it's, as we said earlier,
I guess the way to stop that is to just leave your leave your phone occasionally in a room playing Justin Bieber for a couple of hours.
Oh God, no, we do.
The NSA operatives will soon stop listening.
Oh yeah, well, I was thinking more along the lines of what is it? The Japanese believe that everything has a soul. So if your device has a soul, you could be responsible for the murder of a device if you left it listening to Justin Bieber. But I really like the Google Now. I really like the functionality. I've gone back to Apple, and there are so many things that they're sort of missing. But as we said earlier on, do I want to be talking to my handset and looking like a numpty? If I was using a Bluetooth headset or headphones like yourself, it may be slightly less obvious. But the second you say "Okay, Google," everybody in the shop would just turn and look at you and go, "He's talking to his phone." So I don't know. If you change the code word to something else, that may be slightly less conspicuous.
Yeah, but it would have to be something like "Hello, dear," and then do you want to be saying "Hello, dear" to Google? And if your wife is beside you, is she going to get a bit suspicious?
It's entirely possible. You can call it Hal. Hello, Hal. Yeah. But the second it called you Dave, you would have to throw your phone down and run away really quickly.
We'll keep going. Internet of Things related stuff. So there's this story about the Internet of Things network connecting parking spaces and smartwatches. Basically, this is about this UK company called Arqiva. And they've revealed plans for a low-power network to connect smart devices in 10 UK cities next year. So basically, what this is a connectivity play again, and it's using a platform like the Zigbee platform, like the Z-Wave platform, like Wi-Fi, except much lower power than Wi-Fi, and it's going to be spread out over 10 cities. This company, Arqiva, if I remember correctly, are one of the ones who were trying to, or who bid in for the connectivity for the smart meter networks in the UK. Yeah. I'm not sure how that bid went.
It's a fascinating company. That's a fascinating company. That used to be owned by the BBC. BBC then spun it off because it owned all the transmitters.
Yeah, they were responsible for the digital television broadcast system, weren't they?
They were, and they they're doing IPT, or they're doing Seesaw TV in the south of Ireland. So they are a catch-up TV service. So in terms of companies that have a background and a track record in doing this sort of stuff, hugely exciting. It's also using bought technology from a French company, I think. So it's not something that's being built. It has been built and seems to be reasonably mature. So
they've got the infrastructure there. They're just making use of it.
Exactly.
Reusing the infrastructure they already have.
Yep, absolutely. The only thing I would say is that those two devices are horrifically ugly. You know, it doesn't make me want to use a smartwatch if it looks like that. But
have you seen? There's a cool smartwatch. The design was showcased. I think is it the Samsung 360? Oh, I forgot the name of it. But basically, it's a round watch face. So it's not the square ones. It might be Sony. I've forgotten who it is. I know I mentioned it in a previous show, but it's a nice one. It uses the Android Wear operating system.
Yeah.
And it's got the round face, and you just swipe through it and it pulls up the usual notifications and things for you. And it's also location aware and things like that as well. The usual kind of things that you'd expect. So it looks like a much better type of device because it's not the big square thing, the big square ugly thing. It's the round one, so it looks nicer. We'll keep going.
Yep.
And SmartThings. SmartThings is a company that have their kind of platform play as well in the Internet of Things space. The difference with their platform is that it's a smartphone platform, basically. One of the biggest problems with the Internet of Things is you get lots of different in-home devices in your Internet of Things space. Everything from locks for your door, through lights, through outlets, power outlets, through fridges, smoke alarms, the whole thing. And they all have their own ways of connecting to them. Each individual has, you have to have an app on your phone for each Internet of Things device you have in your home. Whereas the idea of SmartThings is they have a single app on your phone that you can then connect to all your devices in home.
Yeah.
And you can control everything from the one single app. And they've broadened out, basically. They have a new version of the app out now, and it's a lot easier to connect to the devices you have in home, and it's a lot easier to configure them. And that's it, basically. It's a big play for becoming an Internet of Things platform for controlling everything from within the one application. And the last Internet of Things story that I saw, and I think this could be an interesting one as well, is this project. I think this is Ion. I just blanked out the page there. That was clever. And it's back. So I think it's either Project LON, L-O-N, or Project Ion. I'm not sure, because this is a sans serif font, so it's hard to tell. And it's basically BlackBerry, who used to make smartphones at one time, and they've now decided that they want to use their back end for processing data in the cloud from the Internet of Things, and they're setting up a whole system to do that. And to be honest, this looks like it could have a bit of a bit of substance to it, because BlackBerry have they've lost the smartphone race. That's gone. They're gone out of that space essentially. But what they do have is they do have this name for encryption and permissions and that kind of thing still. So they're saying that they'll be able to apply this technology to the Internet of Things. And one of the concerns people have about the Internet of Things is that when everything is connected, everything is hackable. And BlackBerry are saying, look, we'll do it over encrypted channels. We'll do it in the cloud, in our cloud, totally encrypted, and we'll apply permissions basis to it, so that if one person logs in, they'll see one set of data. Another person logs in, they'll see a different slice of the same data, whatever they have been assigned permissions to. So, particularly in the business environment, I can see this making a lot of sense. Not so much for in-home devices, but definitely, I mean, there's a lot of data coming out of businesses from sensors being interconnected.
Well, the interesting thing, see that QNX software, I did a quick search on that. That software is 30 years old. That software is used in high-capacity, high-volume systems, routers, air traffic control systems, that sort of stuff. That is a very stable, very mature platform. So,
and those kind of systems have massive volumes of data. So it makes sense to dump them into a cloud where you've got kind of an infinite backend in terms of storage and processing ability as well.
I think that out of all of them, whenever you take the Google Nest acquisition, okay, as a start to Google really getting into the Internet of Things, I think this to me is on a par with that type of announcement. When you look at that platform, BlackBerry's tradition and heritage in secure communications, you actually take a lot of the worries off. You have a mature back-end or embedded operating system. It looks really, really good. It really does, and it could homogenize and bring together that platform on the Internet of Things that is so badly needed, as you saw from the previous story, where you're starting to now get aggregate sites doing services, which really they shouldn't have to do. They shouldn't have to be there.
Yeah, agreed. And the next story, I don't know if you'll want to comment on this, talks about how, and if I'm saying that, it's obviously you working for SAP and this being an SAP story.
Yeah.
This story talks about Microsoft and SAP kind of strengthening ties with the story around mobile data and cloud partnership. And it's again, it's three different stories. It's the cloud partnership, it's cloud services, SAP running several of its cloud services on Microsoft's Azure platform, including Business Suite software, etc., etc. The mobile involves SAP building mobile tools that link to the Windows Phone ecosystem, so that you can develop for the Windows phone system. And the third story is around data, where SAP has reconfigured the SAP gateway from Microsoft to connect SAP business objects, giving customers the ability to take data from SAP data repositories and visualize it using updated Microsoft tools. So it's Microsoft and SAP coming closer together in a number of fronts. And I think one takeaway I would have from that would be that it's my enemy's enemy is my friend, and it's the whole Oracle, Microsoft not being the best of friends kind of thing, and SAP and Oracle not being the best of friends. So this is Microsoft kind of jumping in bed with SAP and helping each other out. I don't know. Did you want to mention anything about that, or do you want to steer clear of this one?
I could comment from a SAP mentor and an ecosystem point of view. It's providing more tools to allow people to do more things within the SAP ecosystem is always welcome. So it is. Microsoft has been a key partner of SAP for a very, very long time. So my own work in cloud computing, I'm surprised that it didn't really happen sooner, but it's excellent. The Azure platform's a lovely platform. It's one that I like a lot. So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and there's also the thing that if people want to move off Oracle, it's an alternative platform that they can move on to, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And as we mentioned before the Hangout started, I had a post on GreenMonk a few weeks back about the cloud carbon footprint of the different cloud providers.
Yes.
And one of the better ones turns out to be Microsoft, because they are the largest. They're the second largest purchaser of renewable energy in the US. Intel is the largest purchaser of renewable energy, and Microsoft is number 2. So, if you're moving from an Oracle cloud onto a Microsoft cloud, the chances are you're moving onto a cleaner cloud and you're reducing your emissions.
Even if you have it in your own data center,
yeah,
you could be you could be reducing your carbon footprint. So it's a big.
Obviously, we can't say that definitively.
No.
But I mean, when you look at the vast majority of the power infrastructure in the U.S. Or here in Europe, for that matter, it's nowhere near 100% renewable unless you're in Iceland.
No.
Whereas Microsoft's infrastructure it's something like 80% from renewables directly, and the other 20% from offsets. And they say that by the end of 2014, it's going to be 100% from renewables directly. So, I mean, that's a pretty impressive.
No, absolutely. But I think they also run their data centers a little bit hotter than normal. A lot of the companies that I know, or customers that I've known, they would run their data center in the single figures in terms of temperature. Whereas I think some of the larger people run them maybe 15, maybe 20 degrees, which also reduces the amount of power needed to run the coolers.
It's actually it's not quite as stark as that. So the older data centers will run their temperatures at probably somewhere between 18 and 20, and the newer ones will run them up to 27 or so. And some of the more well, you don't want to say what's the best way? You don't want to say adventurous, but or courageous. But some of the ones who have a better control of the entire infrastructure would even run them up to almost 35.
Wow.
The ASHRAE are the organization for data centers that set the kind of standards, and they broadened the standards on the temperature you could set your data center to, and it had been up to around 22 degrees, and they changed that a couple of years back to up to 27 or 28.
I must have been getting wind chill.
Sorry?
I must have been getting wind chill, because I can tell you one thing: when you're standing in a data center for 8 hours, it doesn't feel like 15 degrees, so it doesn't feel a lot less.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. I've been that soldier. It can be cold, but now when you go into a modern data center, it'll be a lot warmer, and that's a good thing, because the equipment can take it, and it's wasted otherwise. I saw this story, the Smart City project coming out of Canada. And smart because it's the smart motor company. Mm-hmm. And basically what it is that they have this smart city project where, and it's version 1.0 and 2.0. 1.0 was last year, and 2.0 is this year. And it's basically where they've asked people for suggestions on how to make the city smarter. And it's all around Canadian cities, but if you're based in Canada, it's a nice one. Smart, the makers of the car, but they also make this electric bike, this smart electric bike, which is pretty cool. And they have a smart electric car as well. And on this Smart City 2 project, basically, they've got to the point now where they've brought it down to 3 finalists for the competition for ideas to make the city smarter, and they'll be announcing later this summer who the winner is. So that's going to be a fun one to watch. And speaking of transportation, and Google again, here we go. In this case, it's a picture of a Google self-driving car, and the story is around the fact that California has now approved the testing of self-driving cars on public roads. This is the Californian Department of Motor Vehicles, and they have rolled out rules for the testing of automatic or autonomous vehicles on public roads, and that's throughout California now for anyone who wants to test autonomous cars. Basically, they can now apply to the DMV. There's an official rule set which will come into effect in September, and anyone can do it. Up until now, Google have kind of gotten a buy because they've got special permission and it's in a small enclosed area. But now anyone can do it anywhere in California starting in September, as long as they sign up to the rules that have been rolled out by the California DMV. This is going to be a fascinating one to watch. And in fact, if you go to this story, and I was thrilled to see this, if you go to this story and scroll down to the bottom of it and click on the reader comments, there are 79 reader comments, or there were when I opened up this tab. And if you look through the comments, they're nearly all extremely positive around electric vehicles, and they're all people saying, I can't wait, and people saying these will be much. I mean, this is my impression of electric or of automatic vehicles, that I can't wait. I'd love to get into a car, take out my laptop and say, take me to wherever, crack open a beer.
Okay, Google, take me home.
And you're not. I mean, it's not just yourself, but you don't have to worry about some other person, sitting behind the wheel, having had a few drinks, if their car is an automatic car as well, or an autonomous car as well. It just, for me, it makes the whole road safety issue far better. Yeah. And I had thought there'd be a lot of pushback on this. But reading through the comments of the readers of this, no, the vast majority of the comments are all positive and pro-autonomous cars, which is really heartening, I thought.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's an interesting one, because on the UK government took a step back from rules which would have made young drivers, or placed restrictions on young drivers between the ages of 17 to 25, that they couldn't drive at night and things like that there. Whereas if you had an autonomous car, you would never need to worry about that.
Yeah, insurance rates would come down.
Yeah, exactly. Accident rates would come down. You wouldn't have to drive with the implicit impression of the fact that everybody around you is an idiot and will do something stupid. Now, all the cars around you are autonomous, and you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. No, I can't wait. Next story, and shifting gears completely, this was an interesting one, I thought. One of the big problems around cryptography is the ability to create random numbers, and particularly quantum random numbers, or just random numbers, truly random numbers, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And this story talks about how random numbers have been created, and demonstrably random numbers have been created using a smartphone camera in a smartphone. And basically what it does is it examines light coming in onto the sensor and generates random numbers based on the light coming in to the sensor through on the smartphone camera. It was done on a Nokia phone, but there's nothing in the technology that they used which said it couldn't be done on any smartphone. And if that is the case, it completely changes what we can do with our smartphones. They could then become ultra secure. Of all the stories I came across this week, this is the one that has I think the most potential to change what we can do with our smartphones. Everything from payments, because if you can have it ultra secure, I mean, we all think our phone is secure at the moment, and it is to an extent, but suddenly you're getting a level of security and encryption built into your phone that was just previously undreamt of.
Yeah, well, the last, if I remember correctly, the iOS 7, the 1.1 or the iOS 7.1 update, I think somebody had attacked the random number generator. The last number of smartphone updates, the random number generators have all been attacked. They have all been shown to be slightly deficient, if my recollection is. But the ability to do proper random number generating is just phenomenal. The only time I've ever heard of a true random number generator was for the premium phones, where they used to use a flame in an enclosed glass cabinet, and at an appointed time a laser would point at the tip of the flame and take the coordinates off the glass jar and use that as the seed for the random number generator. I think that's the only time that a computer has ever been shown to produce a proper random number. But again, it uses an outside stimulus to create the seed. But that is just brilliant. You could have really secure data just using the camera. You could take.
And it doesn't have to be a phone either. I mean, they demonstrated it on a phone, but nearly all computing devices now have cameras built in.
Yeah, it's the CCD. Is it the photoelectric effect on the CCD that creates the randomness?
Something like that. I've forgotten the full details of it, but it's something like that. Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
way it's the amount of pixels coming in, hitting the sensor, and how many
yeah,
are lost.
it is brilliant. That is, you get PGP encrypt everything you do, and all you would have to do is just not, well, even, just use the camera, and that
Yeah,
would just be brilliant.
yeah. No, it's awesome. It's awesome. And then, speaking of smartphones, this story came up as well, and you got to excuse the Apple reference at the start of it because this is AppleInsider.com.
Right.
It says led by Apple Incorporated. Uh, smartphones now account for 87% of U.S. handsets. The important part to take away is that smartphones now account for 87% of U.S. handsets. Uh, the sales are led in the US by Apple, but put that aside, and smartphones are now 87% of US handset sales.
Yeah.
So that's the key point to take away from this. It's that the vast majority of new handsets being sold now are smartphones, and I mean it's no big surprise. It's what you'd expect, frankly, but it's always good to get a data point around it just to back it up.
But again, you have a major problem in the fact you have 4 vendors there. Although you have a lot of mobile handsets, how much data is being transferred across the mobile networks, how much of those networks investing in their data capacity. If you were to have that graph in Europe, you would have a lot more mobile providers providing better competition and better services.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to say, yes, we've got smartphones, but how many of them are actually being used as smartphones in a meaningful way? I don't know.
Yeah. No. That's a fair point. That is a fair point. We're on to, at this point, the miscellaneous section of the show, and we have this story, which I thought was very cute. The iPad's next killer app, apparently, it's called Osmo, and what it is, it's hard. There's a long write-up in this piece about this application Osmo, and it's hard to get a feel for what the application actually is, despite the length of the write-up, until you actually click on, at the bottom here, well, not, it's halfway down actually, this YouTube video of the game in play. And what it is you've got a stand for an iPad, you've got this little red thing on the iPad, which is basically a mirror, and this mirror points the camera down onto the table in front of the iPad. And then you can do things in front of the iPad and they're mirrored on the screen. So one of the things you can do is you can play with tangrams and make different shapes. So it shows you a shape on the screen and you have to try and make it with the blocks. And then there are ones with letters as well, where you have to try and make words. It shows you a picture and you have to try and spell it out, that kind of thing. So it's an education play, and if you put devices in front of the tablet as well, so they've put a pen in front of it here, it draws the pen on screen. So it recognizes it and draws it and becomes part of the game play. In this particular game, you've got little red dots falling, and you've got to try and block the dots from falling. So on the piece of paper here, you draw this kind of blue arc, and the balls fall into that, it stops them falling. But then if you put the pen down on the sheet of paper, the pen becomes part of the game as well, and that becomes a shape on screen. So it's a very interesting development, I think, for teaching for kids. I mean, we've seen a lot of things bubble up in the education space since the development of tablets, particularly, and I think this is one of the nice ones. This application is it's on a crowdfunding campaign, I think. Yeah, it debuted with its own self-hosted. And I'm just reading it off the screen here. Debuted.
You get it right.
I will eventually. with a self-hosted crowdfunding campaign, basically, So you can go to the site, and the link is in the article there. You can go to the site, click on it, and sign up. And I think it's like $50, and you get the stand for the tablet, you get the mirror, and you get the 3 physical games. The one with the tangrams, the one with the letters, and the third one with the Newton one with things falling down. So and when the crowdfunding campaign ends and it becomes a full product, then those 3 things altogether would be $100 or something like that. So you're getting it for half price essentially.
Yeah.
So
it's one of those ones that obviously working in technology, I believe in technology. I'm a big fan of it. But over the last, since Anna was born, she's now 10 months old. The number of conflicting articles about whether tablets are good, whether technology is good for children and stuff. Just yesterday I read that head teachers are saying, tablets are the worst thing in the entire world and they ruin children's concentrations, and they have no capacity for delayed gratification, that type of stuff. And then you look at something like this, and it's very, very difficult as a parent to know what is good and what is not good, I think. But yeah. I really like this type of thing. I can't understand, I can't see where using games to teach and in a fun way and with technology could be bad. I think there's obviously a parental responsibility at some point in how much they actually play. But you look at Minecraft, we've talked about Minecraft and your boys.
Yeah.
It's taught your boys how to construct amazing landscapes and amazing structures. How could that be bad? But I would buy this. I think it would be cool.
Yeah, likewise. And well, I would buy it if my kids were a little younger. I think they're now 8 and 11, and I think they're possibly a little bit old for it at this point. Yeah. But I have them, as I mentioned last week, I have them on code.org, and they love that. They absolutely love that. They get a ball going through the puzzles and that, and learning how to code their way around the challenges that are set for them. So that's pretty cool. I think, to your point about kids and access to devices and how that's affecting them, I think it is having an effect on kids. I don't think it's good or bad. I think it's just different.
Yeah.
I think it's changing how kids think. So their way of approaching problems and their way of doing things is going to be different to ours. Some people will say that's a bad thing. Some people will say it's a good thing. I don't think it's either. I think it's just different. I think it'll benefit them in that they'll be better prepared for the world that they will grow into. So I guess in that sense it's good.
I think I would agree with that actually, Tom. I think that's it's a pragmatic and being optimistic way of looking at it. I think I think that is probably the truth of it. So it is.
Yeah. We'll power on through. We've got 3 stories left, and we want to get them done in the next. We've got 7 minutes before we hit the top of the hour, so we'll keep going. They're short enough ones anyway. The first one of the 3 is that Fitbit now apparently rules 50% of the world's wearable market. So basically, on their sales last year, they hit 50% of the wearables, which surprised me because I figured they had a recall with the picture here is a Fitbit Force.
Yes.
And when they released that last year, some people started complaining of an allergy associated with wearing it and getting kind of rashes on the wrist from wearing it. Now I have one of these Fitbit Forces myself, and I got it last December, and I got it to help monitor the recuperation from the operation I had on my ankle. So I'm still in crutches, but I'm keeping track using the Fitbit Force of the recuperation, how many steps I'm doing a day, that kind of thing. So for me, it's interesting for that. And this whole wearables and health tracking kind of thing, I think it's a massively growing industry, and I think it's a good one. The whole idea of the quantified self, I think it's badly needed, and I'm interested to see it. And I was surprised that despite the recall last year, Fitbit came out with 50% of the market. It was interesting.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, because whenever you consider, off the top of my head, if you asked me to name 3 wearables, it would be the Nike one.
Fuel band, is it?
The Fuel band, yes, the Fuel band. The Jawbone up, and then Fitbit. So Nike have shut down their field band guys. The Jawbone Up was completely recalled, and they stopped it until version 2, which meant they lost a lot of momentum against Fitbit. So the 50% does not surprise me at all. But
I guess the Jawbone, the Up, doesn't have the display that the Fitbit Force has, which I think, if you're going to wear something on your wrist, it might at least, it should at least tell you the time at the very least.
Exactly. And it wasn't Bluetooth. Jawbone is a Bluetooth-based company, and the one device they had, which was going to do so well, had a physical connection. Didn't get it. Just looked at it and went, who did you buy it, or did you make it, or what did you do? It was, but it, but now they might have an innovator's dilemma. They have a good market. There's not. Is there a lot of turnover in that market? Is the market for you have phones and things like that where you have next versions and updates and all the rest of it. How much innovation can you do in that quantified self space?
Well, I think, and you and I are going to see this in the next couple of weeks and months with the Apple announcement on the 2nd of June.
Oh, yes.
We'll see what they're going to bring out with their HealthBook application, and whether they have a hardware device to bring out as well.
Yeah.
Hardware devices they mightn't announce at the developer event. They typically keep the hardware announcements until the September-October announcement time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we'll see anything hardware-wise at the June event, but we'll definitely see they'll be announcing at that iOS 8 where they've got the HealthBook application, and it's going to be fascinating to see how open the HealthBook application will be to outside data sources. Apple, of course, have never been very open about anything, but I think because there's a large user base of people out there with devices like this, I think they might just have to take in the data from those if they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, we're on to the second last story, and it's around IBM and their acquiring of this artificial intelligence startup Cognia. And basically what this is it's them, I guess, they're trying to find ways to make access to Watson more palatable. I guess is the way to put it. Basically, this Cognia company have got this kind of personal assistant who can be a front end to an AI back end. And she's this kind of on-screen persona who talks to you. And is supposed to be able to, learn and have personality traits and things like that. And it's kind of like Siri, but taken, 2 or 3 steps further, and for Watson. So this massive brain at the back of it. I kind of feel, and I don't know how you feel about this, Chris, but I kind of feel that, Watson is something that's this massive, massive solution, and everyone is looking for problems to throw at it.
Yeah. I just wonder, you see it on a smartphone there, and the thing about it is that it doesn't have a hardware back end. We have Cortana with the Microsoft platform, which I think blows Siri out of the water completely because it actually has a personality. Google's offering has no personality whatsoever, but it is very functional. So you look at something like that and you think, I don't really care that it has Watson sitting behind it. It's fascinating that it does, but until it's actually, the barrier to the utilization of it is really low. Like, it's baked into the device and I can use it directly without having to do anything else, then I would be interested. But I just, as you say, they have this fantastic solution. They're just looking for problems to throw at it. Yeah. Which is a pity because it is such an amazing solution. Yeah. It is such an amazing solution. It's if you could get Watson and Wolf from Alpha to have a child, that would just be amazing.
Well, now that we've got Cognia there, we've got the female part of it. So
exactly.
Okay, last story, and I think this is an interesting one, and I particularly wanted to end on this. And if you're not aware, the longitude prize was a prize that was offered around 300 years ago, and it was to figure out how to accurately predict or accurately report on where your longitude was at any point, so that if you were a sailor, you could plot where you were and where you wanted to get to. So extremely important for navigational purposes 300 years ago, and eventually it was solved by a clockmaker, John Harrison, and he won the prize after a long time. I mean,
a very long time.
Yeah, they didn't want to accept his clock for a long time for lots of different political reasons, I guess, more than anything else. He wasn't a scientist; he was a clockmaker, so there's a bit of snobbery attached to it as well. But anyway, that's the kind of historical background. They've now come up with a new 2014 longitude prize, and what they've done is they've said, okay, we've identified 6 different challenges, 6 key problems facing the world, and they're putting those challenges to a public vote to determine which of the 6 will become the winning prize challenge. And then once the winning prize challenge has been determined, then it'll be opened. The prize is going to be £10 million UK, £10 million sterling, for whoever cracks the problem. And the problems are the 6 problems, one of which will be the longitude prize challenge. One is around dementia and the fact that while 44 million people globally have it now, 135 million people will have it by 2050.
Yeah.
And 71% of those will be poor and middle income. The global cost is 600 billion. You can read it off there. So that's one problem, and that's a particularly personal one for me because my dad has Alzheimer's, and it's horrible to see how it's affecting him, and how he has professional carers in minding him for 15 hours a day. It's pretty horrible. It really is. And then there's flight. Transporting people throughout the globe and doing it in a way that is, good for the environment, or at least not bad for the environment. So that's the second. Food, feeding 9.1 billion people. We'll have 9.1 billion people by 2050. How do we feed them? Paralysis. People do get devastating injuries which cause paralysis. Can we come up with exoskeletons or similar to help with them and make people who have these devastating injuries be able to move once more? Water, we have massive water challenges globally, and it's getting worse by the year.
Did you see the California map yesterday that over?
The drought.
The US is in drought at the moment. That's insane.
It is, yeah, it is. And the last one is antibiotics, and of course antibiotics are a huge problem because the first antibiotics were developed back in the 1930s by Alexander Fleming, and since then they've been massively abused. Something like 80% of the antibiotics that are used globally are now used to feed animals, or used in the feed of animals.
Exactly.
And of course that gets into our bloodstream, it gets into rivers, it gets into waste, which means that bacteria are being exposed to antibiotics everywhere in the environment and are developing resistance to it. So there are now massively growing numbers of multiple antibiotic resistant bacteria, which means you get an infection with an antibiotic resistant bacteria. There's no way to treat it.
Well, my neighbour has he was jagged by a plant, and he was advised to be very careful because the sap in the plant is rising, and there's something in the sap that actually causes an infection, and they had one antibiotic that would actually go after it. So all 6 of those are so important, and I watched the Horizon episode last night that went through them, or the night before, and how can you pick one that's more worthy than the other? It's so difficult. I think out of all of them, for me, I think antibiotics would be, whenever you consider the change antibiotics made in the world from between the First and Second World War, the effect was amazing. We how it changed medicine, it affected lives in so many ways. I think that is probably one of the largest threats globally. With if antibiotics are less effective with the spread of disease through transportation networks and things like that, if you had a super plague, it would just the speed at which it could travel at is frightening. Everything else you can work on over time, but a global pandemic is just frightening beyond belief.
It is. I mean, we saw it just after the First World War with the Spanish flu killing nearly 20 million people. 20 million people. I mean, holy crap. I mean, nobody remembers that, but there was more people died from the Spanish flu than died in World War One.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, how can you choose? Each one on its own merit is so important. So important.
Yeah. I've just noticed now that a friend of mine, Joe Gard, has left a number of comments on the event page. So sorry about that, Joe. I've just seen them now. About the autonomous cars. He said, "I'm thinking of Irish roads, Tom. I can I can well go along with that." And he was talking about 3D printing as well. And I guess the antibiotic resistance one, because he's talking about HIV resistance, which is a scary one as well. Yeah. Anyway, we've gone past the top of the hour.
Yes.
It's been great, Chris. Thanks a million for coming on the show.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
I hope everyone enjoyed the show. I think there were some interesting stories we brought up and talked about.
Yep.
And we shall be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks everyone for joining, for watching the show, taking time out, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.